Hello everybody, welcome back to Screen Stars, welcome to another top 10 list. Today's top 10 list, I am focusing on my top 10 favourite movie trilogies of all time. This is a top 10 list I've been wanting to do for quite a while, but to try and decide what my favourite movie trilogies are has not been easy at all, so I've spent a little bit of time thinking about it. And it's one of those where you kind of talk to yourself when you do this list. What is considered a movie trilogy? For example, you won't see on this list the Indiana Jones films. Now, if the fourth one never been released, it would have been on this list, pretty high on this list. But that's a sequence of 4 films rather than 3 films. So I've tried to go with a sequence of 3 films that are rounded off fairly nicely, but there will be some on this list that probably some of you would like to debate whether they are a trilogy or they aren't. But there are some really fun, interesting films on this list, and I do hope you enjoy watching it, everybody. As usual, there are some honourable mentions that I want to talk about. So there's 3 sets of trilogies that just didn't crack my top 10, should I say. And the first one is the Cornetto trilogy of Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz and The World's End. Each of them very, very good in their own right. They're all 3 very, very different films. And I'm sure most of you are very, very familiar with them, but it's a very good trilogy indeed. The next trilogy of films I want to talk about is the Austin Powers films. The first, Austin Powers. The second, The Spy Who Shagged Me. And the third one, Goldmember. Really, really great comedy films, and probably Mike Myers at his absolute best in regards to his comedic powers and his creativity. Fans have been clambering for another one for years. I'm not sure we'll ever get to see another Austin Powers film, but the 3 that we got were really, really fun and very, very entertaining. And the next trilogy is the SpiderMan Trilogy, the Sam Raimi Trilogy, should I say. The first 2 were absolutely brilliant. Perfection, really, in a lot of ways, especially Spider-Man 2. And I think if the third one, Spider-Man 3, had been stronger, I think this would have easily cracked the top 10. It's because the third one is kind of frowned upon by many fans. It's still watchable, but he obviously dropped the ball on this one. Right, coming in at number 10 on my list is the Men in Black trilogy. Now, I know there's a 4th one, the Men in Black International, but that's more of a spin-off than I think a direct sequel to these. I personally would suggest anyway. So the first Men in Black, the second one, and the third one are all really, really good, very, very entertaining in their own way. If I had to choose a weakest of the 3, I would probably have to say Men in Black 2 is probably the weakest. But it is still very entertaining and very, very watchable. The first one is a Stone Cold classic, I think that's fair to say. Will Smith was shooting for the stars in the 90s, and this was one of his earlier films that really put him on the map after Bad Boys, Independence Day, and then they followed it up with this one. Number 9 on the list is the Mad Max Trilogy. Again, I know we've got another Mad Max film, but again, there is some debate whether it's part of this sequence of films, follows it, if it's a direct sequel. It's a different Mad Max to start with, so I think these 3 films stand on their own anyway. So we've got the first Mad Max. That is, I suppose many people would agree that it's certainly showing its age now, but it is a very curious and interesting film. And then we get on to Mad Max 2, which is just absolutely incredible. Some incredible racing sequences and driving sequences. And Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Many people are a huge fan of this one. I actually really liked it. And I think it's a very strong one too. Coming in at number 8 is the Captain America trilogy. I hadn't really considered this one as a trilogy of films, but when I was doing my research for these, this one came up a lot with people, and I thought, well, absolutely, they're right, actually. And it's a very strong trilogy of films as well. The first Captain America, which many would argue is the weakest, and I would agree with that, is still very, very watchable and a great origin story for the character. And then Winter Soldier, for me, is just flawless. It's an absolutely brilliant Captain America film first, superhero film second. And then, of course, we get Civil War, which I actually forgot was a Captain America film. It's an absolutely brilliant film. I think many people would agree for sure. Coming in at number 7, this may be a contentious one for some people, not for me. It's the Star Trek Kelvin Timeline trilogy of films. Hopefully we are going to get a fourth one in time, which I did talk about fairly recently on the channel. So we've got Star Trek Into Darkness, and Star Trek Beyond. These series of films certainly have their critics, and I can understand people's issues with these films to some degree, but I find them really, really entertaining. I find them to be really respectful for what has come before it. Pitch perfect casting for the majority of the Starship Enterprise crew, and they're just hugely entertaining, great fun as well to watch. Coming in at number 6, how could this not make the list? It is the Dollar Trilogy. The Clint Eastwood films from the 60s, so we've got Fistful of Dollars for a few dollars more, and The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. They're all absolutely brilliant, just classic westerns, spaghetti westerns. Many people's favourite is The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, and I can completely understand that. These are the films that completely put Clint Eastwood on the map, and he never looked back once making these films. Great westerns, great entertainment, and we saw Clint Eastwood create an iconic character that has never been forgotten. Wonderful films. Coming in at number 5, it's the Silence of the Lambs trilogy, or the Hannibal trilogy, or whatever you want to call it, really. So we've got the first one, Silence of the Lambs, which I don't think anyone is going to argue is, well, I scored it a 10 out of 10 when I reviewed it. We've got the Hannibal that came out some years later, and then Red Dragon. You could argue that the sequels are varying in quality, but I actually really like all these films. I last year and reviewed them on the channel, and I really, really enjoyed catching up with this series of films. And there's Manhunter as well, which Michael Mann made, which is basically Red Dragon. Red Dragon is a remake of that film. The next one is, maybe some people have issues with my choice here, but I think this is a trilogy of films that deserves to be recognised. We have Unbreakable, which when it was initially released was just a standalone film, and then we got Split, M. Night Shyamalan's return to form, and then the end of that film basically told us that it was part of Unbreakable. And then we got Glass in 2019, I think it was, that's finished the story of these three characters. Very creative, really inventive. They're all absolutely brilliant and very, very watchable. And a great trilogy of films for sure. Getting to the big boys now. Coming in at number 3, and this would probably be many people's number 1. And the top 3, if I'm honest, depending on what side of the bed I wake up on, they could all switch positions very, very easily. But coming in at number 3 today is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. Flawless. Every single one of them are, if I was to analyse and review them, I would probably give them all a 10 out of 10. Wonderful cinema experiences that I had watching these films, and they are incredible to watch. Epic in every sense of the word. The Hobbit films kind of diluted these a little bit, but not by much. They are classics. Coming in at number 2, I nearly said 1 then, because I did consider this for number 1, is the Dark Knight trilogy. Christopher Nolan's masterpieces. They are all, again, arguably 10 out of 10s on the right day, these films. Batman Begins was a fantastic Batman origin story. Then we got The Dark Knight, which in my opinion is right up there for the greatest superhero film ever made. And The Dark Knight Rises, which has got its critics from a lot of people, but still I think it is incredible. Very, very watchable. And just ties the series off absolutely brilliantly. I don't think there's many people going to argue that it deserves its place on the list here. And coming in at number 1, no real surprise, it's the Star Wars trilogy, the original Star Wars trilogy. Again, these kind of have been diluted with what's come after. I like the sequel, I like the prequel trilogy, and I even like the most recent trilogy to some degree. But if you're going to directly compare the new ones to these, there's only going to be one winner. They're all absolute classics. They're all hugely entertaining, family fun, cinema experiences that are never to be forgotten. Certainly for me as a kid going to the cinema to see these films, Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Flawless cinema masterpieces. Well then, there you go. That is my top 10 personal favourite trilogy films. Again, these top 10 lists are quite hard to do because you've got to do quite a bit of research to get where you want to be, and then you've got to kind of have these weird debates with yourself as where you're going to put things and that kind of stuff, and what isn't going to make the list. Some people will be saying, where's the Godfather films? Well, this is my personal favourite trilogy films, and I'll whisper it, I'm not a fan of the Godfather films, if I'm being honest. I can watch them, don't mind them, but I'm not a fan of gangster films per se anyway, as a rule. So there are some that haven't made this list that many of you would certainly add them to your list. I would be really interested in either seeing you do a top 10 list yourself of your favourite trilogies, or let me know in the comments what your favourite trilogies and what order you would put them in. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this top 10 list. I will get to work on another one very soon, and I will be back obviously with plenty more other content on the channel very, very soon.